Welcome everyone to our third of 5 webinars on the circular economy. Each Tuesday this month from 5:30 p.m. UK time, we have a different speaker presenting their work. Thank you to Dr. David Bozward of the Royal Agricultural University for inspiring this webinar series. And secondly, thank you and welcome to our speaker today, Dr. Inès Burrus. Dr. Burrus is an entrepreneur and has recently defended her PhD thesis at the University of Lausanne. She is founder of 3 companies: Equal Profit, the first beyond fair trade certification ensuring equitable profit distribution; Fynka, a unique mobile app to help smallholder farmers take control of their finances; and Terrakodo, an IT company for social impact. The structure of today's webinar will look like this. Dr. Burrus will present for around 20 minutes, and after her talk, the floor will be opened up for your questions and answers. Dr. Burrus, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, David, for the invitation. So I'm going to share my slides. Okay. So thank you very much for being here and for listening to my presentation. I look forward, as we are a small number of participants, to also exchange with you and exchange with your own experience and see whether that relates or not, and how. So the title of my presentation is Achieving Living Income at Farmer Level. The agenda for today is the following. First, I'm going to talk to you about the context of my research. Second, I'm going to expose to you what is the results of my PhD. We are then going to talk about the startups and finally the Q&A. So the context. The research of my PhD is looking at rural youth migration. So we know that smallholder farmers around the world are poor and that rural livelihoods is not attractive to the children. So this is one of the main reasons why young people are leaving rural areas and moving toward urban areas. Why? Because it is one of the only enticing option, livelihood option, is to move in rural from rural to urban areas. So this is called rural youth exodus. Here are some facts and figures. So in terms of international migration, we know that the FAO has provided some numbers. However, numbers are missing in terms of internal migration. So internal migrations is national migration at the level of a country. In terms of international migrations, we know that the number of internal migrants has increased by 41% from 2000 to 2015. And what is impressive is that 1/3 of all international migrants are young people at the age of 15 to 34 years old. In terms of internal migrants, we know that this number is reaching over 1 billion people, which is much higher than international migration. So this is really so that you understand the scope of international and internal migrations. Here are some numbers in terms of the worldwide population. So rural population has decreased quite drastically from 63.6% in 1969 to 44.3% in 2019. The urban population has increased proportionally. So this leads to 2 main issues. First, in terms of food production, we know that the world population is increasing, which leads to an increasing future food demand, which requires an increasing production by 25 to 70% above current levels. And the question is then, if we need to increase this food production, who will take on that challenge? Who are the young people who are willing to produce tomorrow's food? And in terms of smallholder farming, we know that smallholder farming represents 570 million small and family farms. So small farms are defined as farms that are less than 2 hectares, and that the world's agricultural land for smallholder farming is more than 87%. Smallholder farming also engage 75% of the rural population. So you can really understand the importance of smallholder farming for rural population and rural areas. So what happens if those people are then migrating? So this is the main research question, that we call it the focal research question for the PhD, was the following: is how to make farming an attractive occupation for rural youth. My PhD has been sponsored by 3 multinational companies. This is also important for you to understand the context of this research. Those companies are suffering from operational risks, because if young people are not willing or are not interested in producing, for example, coffee, cocoa, and other crops, it can be also cotton, it can be also sugar, then what will happen with their own supply chain? So this represents some operational risks for them. So that's why they were interested in sponsoring my PhD. So the main research question, as mentioned, is how to make farming attractive to youth. And this is a cumulative thesis. That means that 3 articles have been produced. The first one is looking at the following research question: is why do young people leave rural areas? So in the first article, I was looking at identity processes and identity pressures. The second article is then moving from young people. So I interviewed young people in Paraguay and Brazil to multinational companies, managers, shareholders, owners, etc. And the second article was looking at how multinational companies respond to this increasing rural youth exodus and rural poverty. What do they do in order to mitigate this trend? And the third article, while I was observing in the second article that companies are failing to do that, the question was then why and what solutions do they offer and envision? So let's have a look at the first article: Deconstructing Rural Youth Livelihood Dynamics, Positive Identity Work Towards Resilience. So I'm going to be quite quick on the results of this research, and so that we have some time as well to look at the entrepreneurial side. So here is a short video of one of my interviews in Brazil. So this young person is a farmer himself, and he's studying agroecology. He's explaining all the constraints that are hindering young people to continue farming.
Querer ficar zona rural não foi desde que nasceu, porque quando a gente está pequeno a gente vê muitas ilusões. O sistema também coloca na cabeça da gente. Vamos pensar ficar no campo. Porque, na verdade, o currículo escolar hoje faz com que a juventude saia do campo. Não tem nenhuma professora do ensino fundamental, ensino médio, nenhum professor falou para mim para se estudar para ser agricultor. Nenhum. Eu também, a dificuldade que a gente tem também no campo é a falta de acesso a crédito para investimento. Isso também contou bastante, porque, na verdade, como eu ficar no campo sem sobreviver, sem ter uma renda, sem uma gente jovem que quer sair, quer se divertir, comprar alguma coisa aí. Eu quero mesmo comprar mesmo a minha terra. Porque a terra que eu vou ter, não sei para os meus filhos, não vai dar suficiente. Porque também querem manter a família deles.
Sorry. So here from this short interview, we understand clearly that access to land, access to finance are 2 of the major challenges that young people are facing, at least in Brazil. So the contribution of this first article, first in terms of the phenomenon, the results is that young people leave rural areas. Why? Because their reality doesn't meet their needs and aspirations. Basically, that is the pressure that leads, this identity pressure leads to a decision-making process. And this decision-making process has different results. And one of the results is to leave their current livelihood. In terms, I will skip the theoretical parts, but you can have a look at it later. This is the second essay. The second essay is then, as mentioned before, I moved from interviewing young people in Brazil and Paraguay towards moving to the managers of those multinational companies, trying to understand what they are doing in a position or in order to mitigate or to make sure that farming becomes an attractive occupation for young people. So this work is called, in the institutional theory, which is the lens, the theoretical lens of my PhD, it's called maintenance work towards identity reconciliation, in order to mitigate these tensions between who people are willing to become and who they are. So the results of this second article, interviewing many people in different companies, different commodities, is that there is a means and decoupling. And this is an interesting phenomenon that you can also observe in terms of the climate crisis. And decoupling means that there is a mismatch between CSR strategies where managers are recognizing the need of intervening and the need to make sure that farming becomes an attractive occupation, and their interventions. The intervention don't match the strategies, and that leads to a CSR unexpected impacts or lack of impact rather. What we find in this second article is that in order to make sure that there is this identity reconciliation that I just mentioned in the title of this article, what is of key importance is to ensure that young people have a financial well-being, to ensure that young people can be financially independent in rural areas. And what we see with CSR interventions is that even if managers are aware of the importance of farmers' financial well-being, the interventions that they are implementing on the field don't match or don't respond to this financial well-being. Why? For example, because they are implementing trainings in order to increase productivity, but nobody is talking really about the price of this commodity. They are building water pumps, building schools, doing many activities, but nobody is really focusing on how much they are earning and whether the relationship between the supplier and the purchaser is sustainable or not and leads to this financial well-being or not. So the contribution is that to make young people stay in rural areas, it is necessary to improve rural livelihood to mitigate the gap between reality, needs, and aspiration. That's the path towards keeping people or making farming attractive in rural areas. So farmers' financial well-being is key in achieving this goal. And in context of poverty, financial resources are at the center of identity construction. What we found in terms of CSR is that there is a missing link between, as mentioned, CSR strategy, CSR intervention, and identity reconciliation. So we are concluding that there is a failure of maintenance work by multinational companies. Why? Because most multinational companies implement CSR strategies that do not, only partially or indirectly. And by that, I mean, for example, some schemes or some certification or some premiums that they're implementing ensure rural youth financial well-being. The third essay is now we understand why people, why there is a rural youth exodus and why farming is not attractive to them. Then we understand as well why the CSR interventions is not enough. Then the question is maybe to understand how do multinational companies make sense of farmers' poverty and whether a new economic order is necessary or not. In order to develop and write this last article, I also interviewed some managers from different companies. We can mention sugar. Most of them are commodities, soft commodities. And I tried to understand what are the pressures of the existing system. And what we are observing is that those managers, so CSR managers, sustainable supply chain managers, etc., acknowledge the fact that the market price of those commodities lead to farmers' poverty. They also understand that farmers' poverty leads to risks, operational risks for their organization that they need to mitigate those risks in order to make sure that the end product will still be produced. At the same time, they realize the lack of impact of CSR interventions. This is clearly a parallel to article number 2. On the other side, everybody is very aware that consumers are expecting a sustainable product, expecting a green product, but they are not always willing to put the price. So there is this sustainability pressure, but at the same time, the final price might or might not be higher. And lastly, there is a continuing shareholders' pressure in order to increase the return on investment on those organizations. So this is what I call a paralysis, an institutional paralysis, where managers in organizations are pushed towards more sustainability, but at the same time, there is a profitability logic that is also constraining them to put more resources towards, for example, more impactful CSR. So also another example is, for example, brand managers who are willing to have and to sell the sustainability story for one of the end products, but at the same time, they don't want to put more resources for the sustainability sourcing managers or department procurement. And then the question was, okay, I understand why there is a paralysis. I understand why the institutional setting is as it is. And I understand as well that it's difficult to move towards one or the other direction. But then the question is, when I was talking to them one-to-one, what would be potential solutions? What would you envision in order to change the situation? And the 6 solutions that you can see on these slides are coming from those interviews. I haven't invented them. They have been told to me during my interviews. So the first one is that they are suggesting to change purchasing practices. Instead of relying on the market price, which is very volatile and which fluctuates a lot, and often farmers are not paid or are paid below the cost of production, some managers suggest to have long-term purchasing practices, long-term purchasing contracts, where the price is fixed, and this would allow farmers to have a better vision of their future and to be able to project themselves into the future, which is not the case today. The second one is to redistribute power and value, because this is clearly an issue where value and power is often concentrated at the end of the supply chain, and there's no transparency as well in terms of value distribution along the chain. The third solution would be to revisit pricing models and to integrate positive and negative externalities in order to redefine what is the right or the true price of food. And the last solution is to transform business models. This is the most difficult because companies or multinational companies who have been built and started in an institutional setting, which is not the current one, might face some difficulties in order to transform their business models, in order to transform the paradigm in which they are now making business. So how do you change this shareholding structure? How do you change an economy that has been centralized to an economy that is more distributive? This is also one of the options, and the question is how. So the contribution for this last article is that managers make sense, they understand the perceived tension between sustainability and the profitability logic, so those two main pressures. They fail to address the grand challenge of farmers' poverty, and in order to redress inequality in organizations, this requires exceptional practices, radical organizational change. So those are the 4 solutions that have been suggested. In terms of theory, what we can see is that sense-making can lead to organizational paralysis and institutional stability, which is something new in the theory. And the root causes of rural poverty and the mechanism that maintain equality across social groups over time. So this is something that I have shown in the conceptual framework of this last article. So I think this is interesting not only for supply chain management, not only for farmers' poverty, but more importantly on insights to approach grand challenges such as the climate crisis that we are experiencing. Some perspectives. So we see that organizational forms and practices reinforce the unequal distribution of power and privilege in society. That in order to change or to mitigate this poverty, we need to really change radically organizational forms and rethink what business should do and what is their role, responsibilities, and operations. It is important to ensure the dignity, economic and social well-being of all stakeholders, not only shareholders. And here's something that is interesting as well. I would encourage you to look at it. It's that the SDGs, for example, are not, if you look at the KPIs of the SDGs, none of the SDGs are talking about value distribution and the role of the business sector, how to transform business models in order to achieve the grand challenges. So this is, I think as well, very interesting, and this relates to that. So corporations have a critical and essential role to play in this process of change and achieving social equality, fairness, and poverty alleviation. That is clear. However, the question is how to move towards business introspection and who is willing to transform the organizational forms of current companies. So this leads to my entrepreneurial activities. So the question, I could have continued the research towards understanding why inaction, and there are many reasons for why inaction. You can have a look as well as at the different theory explaining why people are offering solutions but are not implementing it, which is quite interesting. But rather than looking at inactions, I preferred to do it myself and to move towards action. So this is what I've been doing during the PhD. So I've created, as mentioned, 3 companies. Here I will show you 2 of them, and I will explain why the third one. So the first one is called Fynka. This is a small app for smallholder farmers to help them control their finances. In my understanding, it's very important that farmers take the control of their finances and be able to save. To save, why? Because today there's a big dependency between parents and children. And in order to break this dependency, parents need to be able to be fully independent financially when they retire. And children need to be also independent and don't provide money or security to their parents. This is key as well for their financial well-being. So this app helps them manage their cash flow, helps them understand where their revenue is coming from, where is their costs or expenses sources, and how to manage them better. So this is one of the startups. The second one is Equal Profit. So Equal Profit aims to redistribute power and value more equitably, and I will explain to you how it works. So Equal Profit is a new certification model that ensures equitable value distribution among supply chain actors. What we are doing, we have 3 objectives. The first one is to break power dynamics and create shared value in global supply chain. The second one is to ensure equitable profit distribution and a prospering income. And this is important. It's not a living income, but a prospering income for farmers. And finally, we want to ensure that there is transparency, traceability, but more importantly, equity and ensuring just prices for consumers. This is something new in the fair trade certification world, because at the moment, everything is quite subjective, and we are aiming to move towards something that is completely objective, a mathematical model that is implemented, and I will show you how. So we are defining equity or an equitable value distribution by ensuring that each actor in the supply chain earns a profit that is proportional to their costs. And the principle is that the more you contribute, the bigger your effort basically in the supply chain, the more you earn. And on the top graph, you can see that this is the existing situation of any supply chain where profits are not distributed proportionally to their costs. And what we are aiming to have as an impact is to distribute profit proportionally to the cost, as shown in the below graph. So here's an example of how it works, how it is implemented on the cocoa supply chain.
The implementation of equal profit certification. Let's consider the example of a hypothetical cocoa supply chain with 4 actors. The farmer produces cocoa beans. The factory makes chocolate bars out of those beans, which you can purchase in the shop. What each actor is earning at each stage depends on their market power. Farmers and smaller actors often struggle to earn a living, and that's where equal profit comes in. So, what does equal profit mean? Equal profit means that profit is distributed in a way that is proportional to the effort that each actor puts into the supply chain. This effort is measured as a function of the costs, including risks borne by each actor. The equal profit principle is simple. The more each supply chain actor contributes to the final product, the more they earn. The equal profit principle implies collecting the production and operating costs, including risks, of each actor in a transparent manner. The role of the equal profit platform is to verify the data provided by all actors and to make this data visible to each individual actor. Data verification goes on until the final validation of all cost-related data provided by each actor. This is also applicable to the equal profit platform itself. Thus, the total costs are calculated, which in this example are equal to 10 euros. This allows us to calculate the percentage of costs borne per actor. Based on a detailed market study, an average market price for our hypothetical chocolate bar is defined. That will later be adjusted according to the equal profit certification model. The total costs are subtracted from the selling price to obtain the profit. The total profit of €5 in our example is then shared according to the equal profit principle, proportionally to the costs and risks borne by each actor. The net profit margin, or net profit divided by revenue, is calculated, which represents the percentage of profit each actor produces from their total revenues. Equal profit therefore means equal net profit margin for each actor. If any actor is not satisfied with their net profit margin, it is the final selling price that is adjusted and validated to ensure the sustainability of each actor. Once the final selling price is validated, financial and physical transactions of the certified goods can occur. Consumers can scan the QR code of equal profit certified products to discover the net profit margin applied to all actors, in addition to other interesting information about the product and its journey. Consumers' feedback on the selling price is also gathered via the Equal Profit platform. Are you convinced?
So this is, that was for the cocoa, and we have a chocolate that is certified, and this is for the coffee. So here you can see that there is a QR code that you can scan and our logo next to it. So when you scan the QR code of the coffee bag, yeah, you arrive on a web page where there is two graphs. The first one on the left is the breakdown of the revenues of each actor, but this doesn't reveal much information except how much everybody has received. What is more important is the graph on the right, which shows exactly what I just mentioned, is that every actor earns a profit that is proportional to the costs. So let's have a look at the farmers. They represent 31% of the total costs, and this is the reason why they would represent 31% and they would receive 31% of the total profit. What is completely new is that nobody can impose their power. There's no power dynamic in this chain. And what is more importantly as well is that nobody will receive something that is below the costs of production. So they would always at least cover the costs. So here's a short video which explains what is the impact of equal profits on the actors themselves. So here you have one of the manager of ensembles, Diego, who has worked with us and helped us as well gather data at the farmers level.
Con ensambles estamos explorando diferentes formas de vincularnos con los productores, como de procesar café y cómo de comercializar café de una manera en la que se vea reflejado el valor de cada uno de los puntos de la cadena de valor del café. Es muy grato para nosotros haber encontrado Equal Profit, esta iniciativa suiza, desde la cual se quiere precisamente establecer una relación con los productores para que el retorno final del precio que paga el consumidor final del café se distribuya equitativamente en cada uno de los puntos que genera valor al café. Los productores de café en México tradicionalmente han vendido su café a precios muy bajos. La mayoría de las veces venden su café a precios por debajo del costo de producción y muy por debajo del trabajo digno que ellos realizan para su café. El modelo de Equal Profit para ensambles y para los productores nos abre mucha esperanza y nos abre una puerta para explorar una nueva manera, no solamente de entender la economía del café, sino una nueva manera de que los consumidores finales puedan realmente estar aportando el valor real que tiene una taza de café, y vamos a darnos cuenta que ese precio que paga el consumidor final va a ir proporcional en los costos que puso cada uno de las partes que dio valor al café.
So those are the two other products that we have certified, chocolates, bars from Ecuador and mangoes from Brazil. So you can have a look at the analysis as well on our website. For both, they are available. So in order to scale up, because until now we have been working with small and social entrepreneurs where there was no need to convince them to adopt the model, The objective is clearly to scale up and to make more people adopt our model. So in order to do that, we have split equal profit in 2 steps. The first one is called transparent profit certified, and the second one is equal profit. Why? Because we think that is the first step should be transparency, and the second step equity. And nobody can find any argument against transparency to understand what is the actual distribution of value. This would lead to some dialogue between supply chain actors and hopefully towards more equity, be it with equal profit or with any other system. So this is what we are aiming to work with, is with transparent profit, and to be able to have bigger companies involved in the process. In order to develop all those things, be it Fynka, the small app for smallholder farmers, or equal profit, we need to develop an IT platform as well as a small application. And for this reason, I have built the third social enterprise, which is Terrakodo, which is an IT company which is really focusing on social projects. So the objective of this platform is to integrate some mapping of the supply chain actors and some flows. We have the information flows, also the material flows, the financial flows that we are mapping. We are also developing a mathematical model in order to be able to adapt the equal profit model for coffee, but as well for chocolate, for example, cows, for meat, for any product, as well textile products, for example, so that we can really understand what is the value of each actor. We are also developing some artificial intelligence algorithm, because here you can see that the incentive is not to mitigate your costs in order to increase your profits. It's the opposite, is to make sure that you have the more cost, the more the profit you will get. And our role is as well to control that there is no mistakes in the cost calculation. So we are developing some artificial intelligence algorithm, which will play as well the role of auditors. In addition to that, we are also analyzing the risks of the supply chains using discrete simulations, as well as some digital trust technology. So the difficulty, and this is a conclusion, the difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping from old ones. And this is daily work that we're trying to do. Thank you very much.